consultants have a lot of advantages over people who are embedded in the organization, right? If you've been in finance in this company for the last 5 years and you plan to be there for another 10, some people would say you just don't have as much leverage, right? Because you're not going to walk out the door. You know what I mean? You're not going to raise your prices on your boss. So there's kind of some limitations. The benefit should be that you understand the culture, you know who to talk to, you can get it done quicker, you know where all the skeletons are in the closet, and you should have some trust with your boss. I mean, if you've been there for 5 years or 4 years and you don't actually have the benefit of having been embedded, where you don't have a network, you don't have the trust, you don't have those tailwinds to your advantage, you need to check yourself, because that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because that means you've been there 5 years, but you're still a stranger. That's a problem, right? So hopefully, since you're embedded, you've done great work. They recognize you. You can drop the ball every once in a while, and it's not a problem. You know what I mean? Like, you have that relational equity where you're kind of rich in terms of relational equity, hopefully.
Yeah, but make me think back to something you've already said. If you are in the organization and they really don't know you've been there 5 years, you're probably not asking good questions. You're probably not going around getting to know people, getting to know the business, the organization. You're sitting back passively waiting for people to bring you stuff. I know you're going to enjoy our show today. Our show this week, we're going to be talking about what you as a manager and leader can learn from consulting and from a consultant. So I've got my good friend on the show, John Kim. Many of you might have even heard John on prior shows. John spent his whole career in consulting, and now he teaches at Emory's Goizueta Business School in all the areas of not only consulting, but strategy and healthcare, some of his areas of expertise, to both the undergraduate population as well as the MBA population. So John's going to talk about what we as managers can learn from consultants, some things that consultants do that are particularly effective, everything from scoping projects to client management, that if you put in place into your toolbox, it's probably not only going to earn you better reputation, it might even earn you, as John puts it, a higher billable rate. So listen real close, and when we get done, I'll go over my whole page of notes at the end.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. The Leadership Foundry brings a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development. The Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
John, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So I think this has got to be your fourth or fifth time on the show. Plus, if you think about the business jargon episodes we've done, I mean, you're like a regular.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm going to get one of the Founders Club plaques.
That's exactly right. So normally we have you come on, you talk about strategy and how we can think more strategically, and we've had some conversations around that in the past, since that's one of your many areas of expertise.
Yeah.
But today I want to do a more specific dive into, as managers and leaders in organizations, what can we learn from consultants and the practice of consulting? Because I think there's a lot of things in there that if we apply them in the right way as managers and leaders in organizations, it's going to be better for everybody. So before we jump into that, for listeners who maybe are new to you, just share a little bit about kind of who you are, what you're up to today, and kind of what your journey was that kind of got you there.
Sure. No, absolutely. Name is John Kim. Right now I'm full-time faculty at Emory's Goizueta Business School. That's actually where Brandon and I met, and we graduated MBA in 2005. So it's been 25 years in corporate America, last 4 at Emory teaching. I teach strategy, management consulting, and healthcare strategy, basically all the fun classes. And prior to that, basically 12 years in consulting. So 6 years at Deloitte doing various stuff. And then the last 6 prior to Emory in healthcare, basically, helping hospitals to see more patients. So it's great fun. I'm a management consultant by passion and experience. And I think this topic's really relevant because if you've ever been a manager, and then you see a consultant come in for, 3 months, get paid a lot of money. And basically sometimes say things that you've been thinking the whole time, they get a pat on the back and then they leave. And so I think, there's a lot that managers can learn from, the sages, the magicians, management consultants.
And you left out your blog. So
thank you for that plug. I appreciate it. No, I've been blogging for 8 or 9 years. Brandon, you've been blogging for many years too. It's Consultants with an S, Mind, Consultants Mind, the mind of a consultant. And it's been great fun because it's a chance for you to get your thoughts on paper and you own it. So one takeaway that I think Brandon and I would probably recommend everybody is, maybe you work in a company, that's fine. Maybe you wouldn't want to share this and you want to be anonymous for a while, that's fine. But find a place where you can get your thoughts on paper where you own them, you have the intellectual property. And what you're going to find is that there's surprisingly few people out there who are actually sharing authentic thoughts. Most people are trying to sell you something. So I think it's a great chance for you to kind of build a library of content.
Yeah. And you've been doing this for, like you said, a long time. I've got a lot of followers, and your focus is primarily on, again, consultants and consulting. So let's segue off of that into our topic for today. So sure. I don't know, John, if you've got a particular starting place, but when you think about what your kind of your typical manager in an organization, where they can really start to learn from what consultants do and how consultants work, what might be a good starting place?
I think the best place to start is the fact that consultants sell projects to clients. So if you're a manager and you're reporting up to a VP, you maybe don't do a lot of selling in the sense that your VP tells you to do something and you go and do it and, it works. But there's not as much work on the front end. And I mean that in a couple of respects. One is it's possible as a manager, you're not asking enough questions to understand the scope. Like, what exactly are you asking for and why are you asking for it? Not to be difficult, but just to make sure that, using a cooking analogy, you are cooking exactly what they want to eat. Or if they don't know what they want to eat, you're helping that conversation along. So the fancy way to say this is scope, where consultants, they're not going to sign up for a project without having a pretty clear proposal, statement of work with, what are the deliverables? What do you want? Number 2, how much are you going to pay me to do it? Number 3, how long is it going to take? Number 4, what I need you to do so that I can make you successful. In other words, there's a lot of, frankly speaking, negotiations that happen up front. And the downside of it is that, oh my gosh, sometimes these proposals last 6 months. And both the client and the consultant get a little exhausted, right? Because they're like, dude, can we just do the work instead of talking about doing the work?
Yeah.
But the benefit is by doing all that scoping up front, you have kind of clear expectations. The chances of you being successful is a lot higher. Just generally, the diner is going to get the food that you promised and they wanted. So maybe the last kind of analogy is that sometimes your boss will ask you for something and it sounds like, hey, John, would you just give me some food?
Yeah.
But you would never go to the restaurant and just order food, right? I mean, restaurants are very clear. No, it's going to be a 14-ounce steak of a certain cut. Or if you have a glass of wine, it's going to be a 6-ounce pour versus a 9-ounce pour. Just being very specific about what they want and what you're going to give them. I think that helps.
Yeah, I think that's so brilliant. I mean, so simple, but so important. And exactly, I mean, every consultant is trained early on that we're going to scope every single project well. And I think you set up really well. What's the output? What's the deliverables? What the timing of it? The pay? And even, it's a subtle point, but an important one. What support am I going to get from the client? Or in this case, my manager.
Right.
So I think that's so important that we do that because often we forget to do that with our managers and then expectations get missed and then that becomes an issue.
And to give a little grace, GRACE, a lot of times bosses or VPs or, chief operating officers, they themselves don't exactly know what they want. It's possible, right? So they're like, we're having a problem with customer retention. Would you do X, Y, and Z? But if you're the one who works with this data all the time, it's very possible that report already exists, or you can find a different way to solve the problem without just going and fetching it like a dog. So in other words, take a little time at the front end of something to see if you can't really put some borders around it and kind of clarify what's needed. And I think, honestly, business executives, they make their salaries by asking good questions. So I think managers' ability to ask good questions in a respectful way to their VPs, that'll pay dividends. That'll pay dividends.
So as you were talking, there was something else I wanted to ask you about. My book that I released last year was all about urgency and hot sauce principle, how to live and lead in a world where everything's urgent all the time, right? And so I was doing a talk even this weekend for the incoming class of Leadership Atlanta, leaders, 77 leaders, and talked a little bit about that as well. And, and one of the questions that they brought to me, someone in the audience, I get all the time is, what do I do when my boss starts to ask for unrealistic things, continues to create more and more urgency? In other words, using our language today, we scoped it all nicely, and now they're asking for something that's out of scope. Okay, they're trying to expand the scope without expanding the win or the pay or anything else. So I'm sure this happens to consultants all the time, where the client tries to push on the scope, tries to ask for stuff that's not in the agreement. How do consultants handle that?
Yeah, and I'll say, first of all, that's always true. I have a landscaper who's putting in some sod in my backyard, and I'm the same way. I'm like, hey, man, can you put a little bit more sod over there? It might not have been in scope, but we're kind of wired that way, right? To try to get a little bit more. So that's not surprising. I think one is try to qualify, one, how important and urgent it is. And then number two, how easy is it to get done? So it's very important to the original project. Maybe you just overlooked it both, right? You and she both kind of understand now that, we should have thought about that. That definitely needs to be done. And in that case, do the work, right? Just do the work. It's possible, though, you find out that it's actually not that important, right? And then you have a little bit of a decision, right? So it's not important. If it's going to take a lot of time and work, then you need to push back in a smart way. Keep asking questions until you find an easier hack way to do it, or find a way to push it off till later, or get her to take things off of your plate, right? The flip side of it is that it's not going to take a lot of work, and it might be important or might not, but it doesn't take a lot of work, in which case, once again, just do the work. You can keep track on it, like, hey, I spent an hour on Saturday to do that Excel and slice the data a different way. But honestly, all of our jobs are to make our clients and customers and bosses successful. So if it doesn't take a lot of work, just be a good egg, do it, tell them that you took the time to do it, but just get it done.
Yeah, I love that. That kind of falls in that bucket of extra client service, right? You're extra value add. We're trying to give a little bit of, free, just to maintain and strengthen that relationship.
And I think that if we were to pivot a little bit and say, consultants have a lot of advantages over people who are embedded in the organization, right? If you've been in finance in this company for the last 5 years and you plan to be there for another 10, some people would say you just don't have as much leverage, right? Because you're not going to walk out the door. You know what I mean? You're not going to raise your prices on your boss. So there's kind of some limitations. The benefit should be that you understand the culture, you know who to talk to, you can get it done quicker, you know where all the skeletons are in the closet, and you should have some trust with your boss. If you've been there for 5 years or 4 years and you don't actually have the benefit of having been embedded, where you don't have a network, you don't have the trust, you don't have those tailwinds to your advantage, you need to check yourself, because that's a problem, right? Because that means you've been there 5 years, but you're still a stranger. that's a problem, right? So hopefully, since you're embedded, you've done great work. They recognize you. There's, you can drop the ball every once in a while, and it's not a problem. You know what I mean? Like you have that relational equity where you're kind of rich in terms of relational equity. Hopefully,
Yeah, but it makes me think back to something you've already said. If you are in the organization and they really don't know you, you've been there 5 years, you're probably not asking good questions. You're probably not going around getting to know people, getting to know the business, the organization. You're sitting back passively waiting for people to bring you stuff. And you said early on, consultants they are active question askers. So that's good.
I think so. I think that's very true. With COVID and the pandemic, and in 2020, like every strategy department was 100% wrong last year, and every CEO, it became a huge lesson in humility, where everyone just realized, saying I don't know is permissible, and that's okay. And I would think that managers, even if you've been in for finance in that role for 5 years per se, it's okay to say you don't know, as long as you don't say that over and over and over again, right? So I think, like you had mentioned, having that sense of curiosity is crazy important, right? Like your boss's boss, what's keeping them up at night? What's a project that you'd like to take on that would be pretty cool, that you're solving problems that haven't even been brought to you? I mean, that's what you want, right?
Yeah. So we got this idea of scope. We've got this idea of how to manage scope, asking good questions, getting curious. What else can we learn from consultants?
Consultants get paid pretty well. So let's talk about that. Okay. Baby needs new shoes, right? So, I guess what I'm trying to say there is that, provide massive value, and then find ways for you to be compensated either through money or prestige or career path or project choice, where some of that benefit's accruing to you. And that's easier said than done, frankly, because I've been in corporate America many, many years, as many as I was a consultant. And frankly, it's really easy to just settle, right? It's like, I'm not getting paid enough to worry this much. The only problem there is that with the amount of, they call it RPA, or robotic process automation, which is just a fancy way to say that the machine's going to do a lot of the busy work that we all used to be doing, that if you start settling, you're in trouble. So what I would say is try to do a lot better than you even think you're being compensated to do, and then constantly push to get more of that recognition and compensation to accrue to you. Basically, raise your bill rate, I guess is the fancy way to say it, right? Take your salary, divide it by 2,000 hours a year, whatever that is, $70, $100, whatever. And you need to be pushing up that bill rate, even if you plan to stay there. And that's that whole idea of craftsman and professionalism. Consultants always need to improve their bill rate, or else, honestly, they're not going to be at that consulting firm for much longer.
Yeah. But to go back to what you said in the beginning of that, you have to first understand the value that you're bringing.
Yeah.
Because then that can easily translate into where I think some people go wrong is they say, you kind of made a similar analogy, my stress isn't worth this.
Yeah, totally.
Well, but that's not what it's about. It's not about, they're not paying you to inflict pain. They're paying you for value creation. So what is that? And if you're bringing the company $1.5 million a year and they're paying you $50,000 a year, well, there's a big gap there. So it's finding a way to quantify as best you can the value that you're bringing.
Yeah. I think that last point's really clear, where consultants are better than average at proving that they were worth it.
Yeah.
So consultants, you'll hire a consultant and they will track, how many clicks, or, how many people filled out a survey, or how many more patients you saw, or how much cost you saved. I mean, for them, at the end of the day, they want to put it into a soundbite and mention that soundbite to the next client. So Another way to say that is, even if you're 35, 45, 55 years old in a company, and let's say you don't actively update your resume, that's okay. But is the work that you're doing, does that fit into a resume bullet with numbers in it? In other words, if you're doing something and like, I administered a process that facilitated this and moved paper around and generally got alignment, I would say zero value. It's like round down. You're a nice person and you have a network. Round down, right? If you were a consultant, you wouldn't be able to get the next client by saying those kind of abstracto, I help to manage the minutia of administration. So basically, all I'm saying is not to insult anybody. It's just think, at the end of the day, what am I delivering for the company? Is it more revenue, higher customer retention? Am I creating the IT platform necessary to reduce costs so that we're more do the thinking of why what you're doing is awesome, right? And sometimes you need your boss's help to say, hey, look, boss, I understand this project's important. Can you help me understand how this ties into where the company's headed in case I get trapped in an elevator with a CFO? And I can explain what I do in words that make me appear valuable, quantify stuff basically.
So, all right. So we've got this now, another added piece, right? Understand your value and leverage that so you can increase your billable rate, right? Or increase your compensation. So as you were talking, something else kind of struck me. I heard when I was doing 360 interviews some years ago, I was interviewing a VP. And I think you and I might have even talked about this in one of our prior shows. And he said, the difference between a manager is a person who had just moved into a director role. And I was doing 360 interviews to try and set her up really well for success.
Yeah.
And he said to me, the difference between a manager and a director is when a manager shows up to a meeting with senior leaders, that's fine. They can kind of sit there passively and we'll tell her or him what to do. But if a director shows up, we expect them to bring a point of view. Okay.
Love that.
We get the idea that's important to bring a point of view, particularly director level and above. And not to say that managers shouldn't either, but it's more a requirement, director level and above. Mm-hmm. Consultants are really good about bringing a point of view. So tell me a little about that. What can we learn from consultants on if you were trying to tell this director what it means to bring a point of view? What would you tell her or him?
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I spent 7 years in South Korea, and South Korea is a very hierarchical place where you don't have a point of view that your boss doesn't have. And I know that's an exaggeration, but that's not untrue of Asian business culture, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit of a yes, boss kind of culture. So that's kind of the extreme on one side, right? But I think having a point of view, I think in that is a couple things. One is having done the work. Nobody wants to hear your point of view if you're winging it, right? If you haven't done the research and you don't know jack about that topic, you shouldn't even be opening your mouth. Okay, so this is definitely not ad lib, right? So one, you've done the work. And I think the work has a couple of dimensions. It's functionally, you've done the work. Let's say I'm in marketing. So functionally, I'm content rich. Like I know our company's products, how they're positioned. I understand the pricing strategy. I know me. I know what we do. Got it. In addition to that, you should probably understand the competition as well as other dimensions outside of your company. If for instance, if you work at Target and you're only talking about Target marketing, that's a problem, right? So when you being content rich, that's way outside of just your company and frankly, outside of your industry, right? Because industries are colliding, right? If you're talking about grocery and you're not talking about, DoorDash, you have a problem. Yeah. So I guess first, I'm already setting the bar pretty high, which is to say that you need to be content rich. Another aspect of content is, especially once you get to the director role, and this is something, Brandon, I learned from you, a lot of what you do is cross-functional, right? Because all the silos do a great job until a point where they start coalescing at the top. So cross-functional issues by default float to the top.
Yeah.
So as a marketing person, you're good at your own marketing, you're good at external marketing, and then also you understand finance operations, pricing, sales, M&A, and finance, right? So there's that. So let's pretend you've actually done the first half, which is you've gotten smart enough and thoughtful enough to say something. The second part of it, what I would argue is that, something I say a lot is you need to have strong opinions, but they need to be loosely held. Meaning, when you have a point of view, on some level, you need to be advocating for that 60 to 70%. Not 100% because you don't know everything. But you need to have a little bit of a little bit of momentum. So I believe A, B, and C for these reasons. I've done the research. I might be wrong, but as far as I can tell, this is very important. Let's do this. So have a strong opinion backed up with data and kind of what you need and your personal kind of experience. And then it needs to be loosely held, which is a fancy way of saying don't be a jerk. Don't be stubborn in the face of data that tells you you're wrong. And then as a corollary to that, if you're really smart and you actually had a point of view, you probably talked to a couple people before the meeting. You probably went to the meeting with a point of view, but before you went in as a marketing person, you actually talked to the finance and manufacturing person already. And then you're pretty savvy, right? Because you have a point of view and you're like, hey, Jamie, we were talking just in the hallway prior, and you felt that even though we're marketing that manufacturing or in terms of the finance of it, it could work, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got two people, not one person.
So you said so much there, John. It made me think of several things. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, right.
So first, that idea of being able to be broad, but also be able to go deep. I know, like when McKinsey interviews for consultants, they're looking for that. Like they want breadth, and then they'll just grab one of those, strands and go.
Yeah.
They will see if the person could be broad and deep. The second thing that it made me think of was one thing I think consultants are trained on and very skilled at is being able to understand and state their beliefs and assumptions. Right? So they can say, this is the data that I know, and this is where we don't have data, but this is the assumptions we're going to put in place. We're going to assume 2022 is going to be better than 2021, right? We're going to assume certain things, and they're able to state those on a slide because that kind of sets up their rationale, their argument, or their reasoning. And then you mentioned another thing that I just have to mention McKinsey again. So you mentioned pre-wiring. Pre-wire those meetings. And so pre-wiring is what McKinsey calls it. It's in the book, McKinsey Mind. That's the term they use. You have those meetings before the meeting to make sure that you're on the same page and maybe even get a little bit of alignment or some some support. So when you walk in and present, you're not alone in that.
Yeah, all of those things. I would say that I really believe that your boss and your boss's boss, they want you to make their job easier. Like even though it seems like on a bad day, it seems like they just are all about giving you hard work and trying to make your life miserable. It's not really true. They're just trying to survive, frankly speaking. And anything that you can do to help them survive is going to be useful. So I think a lot of us need to think about it from the perspective of what is my boss or committee or initiative? What's the goal? And then from that, in all sincerity, what do I think are the 2 or 3 things that really need to happen? Because we can't do it all, frankly speaking. We overextend all the time. What are the most important things? And then, frankly, make it easy for your boss to say yes. Consultants are all about making it easy to say yes. So I will end this by saying, at Amazon, they've banned PowerPoints. And they use long form 6-page single space documents because Jeff Bezos and the team there, they feel like PowerPoints they lead the witness too much, meaning you don't have as robust and open-ended a discussion because a PowerPoint, it's easy for the presenter and very difficult for the audience. And so in the PowerPoint, you just tend to kind of watch along and you might ask a question or two, but basically you're being carried along the presentation. So two thoughts. One, that's true. Number two, for consultants, that's what you want. You don't want random questions, right? You want to do all that work beforehand. And at the final meeting where you have the deliverable, you want them nodding their head and saying yes, because like you said, you've pre-wired the meeting, you made it very clear what the assumptions are, you've kind of prioritized, you've shared your work as you've gone, and it's just kind of a foregone conclusion that we're moving forward, right? So in conclusion, make it easy for your boss to say yes. I think that is what consultants do extremely well.
Fantastic, John. So can you think of anything we haven't talked about today that we should have? Anything else we could learn from consultants?
No, I think this might seem a little bit flippant or facetious, but consultants, very few of them actually stay in the consulting firm. So maybe only 10% of consultants actually stay in the firm and become a partner. So that means that this industry and function that I personally love, 90% of people leave. To me, what that means is, one, wherever you are, whichever department you're in, there's no shame in leaving, right? So maybe you don't have to be as wed to it emotionally or psychologically or spiritually as you think you are. And then two, but in the meantime, you need to make yourself super valuable, right? Get projects that make you more precious, right? And I'll leave you with this maybe this one challenge. I think all of us, and myself included, even as a faculty member, am I really pushing myself to do the hardest work so that 5 years later, my bill rate will be twice as much as it is now? And if you think back on what you spent the last week doing, if I took that 1 week of your time and we copy pasted that for 5 years, in 5 years' time, would you be more valuable than you are now? Or would you just be the same or even less valuable? So it's kind of like a challenge to all of us to constantly push our bill rate and think big and just think big.
Yeah. You said that interesting stat about 90% of consultants leave. And immediately in my brain, I thought, well, where do they go? They get hired. Right. They get hired by the client almost always. So what the client says is they say, oh my gosh, I've worked with you now on this project for three months, 6 months. And I want to offer you a job because you're proactive, you communicate well, you give me regular updates, you make it easy for me to say yes, you do all the things you just outlined. So that, and then it often happens to coincide with some of maybe their personal life, and they say, I want to get off the road and not travel 100%. And so, they end up shifting to the client. The client hires them. Yeah. So it helps set you up for other jobs when you operate this way.
Yeah, I think there's two things. And even on my LinkedIn profile, I say this, so feel free to steal it from me, no problem. Basically, two things that consultants do, two things that I do is I help executives to make very difficult decisions. Because all the decisions that are left are the difficult ones. The easy ones have already been made, right? We made those in the late 90s, right? So the only ones that are left are the difficult ones. So I help executives make difficult decisions, right? And the second one is I implement change. So, if you're helping your boss and your boss's boss make tough decisions, knowing that your batting average cannot be 1,000, that's impossible, right?
Yeah.
But then also, once the company, the committee, the initiative, you and your department have made a decision, do you make that change happen? Do you get it done? And if you do those two things, your bill rate, I'm telling you, your bill rate will go up for sure.
Yeah, it's great, John. Man, this has been fantastic. Whole page of notes here. So, so the life hack question I always ask, the slight twist on it for you this year.
Yeah.
So what's a life hack you have for us on how we can either have better conversations or healthier relationships at work?
I think for me, assume good intent. And what I mean by that is I love America, born in America, America, land of the free, home of the brave, huge fan. But somehow we're in a spot now where it's this level of distrust and entitlement and finger pointing that is absurd. And so, not to get too too meta about it. I think just for us as individuals, you know, there's that one expression: don't attribute to bad intent what is just ignorance. So what I think is that basically everybody's busy, and so assume good intent. Somebody said something that kind of rubbed you a little bit of the wrong way. Show a little grace, show a little trust. I think that goes really far. Another thing I say sometimes is that trust covers a lot of sins, S-I-N, right? So, if you give a little, somebody else will give you a little, and it's just, it helps your blood pressure come down, and actually work is a lot more fun.
Yeah, amen, brother. We need definitely more of that for sure. So people want to learn more about you, follow you, go to your blog, read your witty posts. Where can they go?
Yeah, sure. Send me a LinkedIn invite. I'm happy to connect with you there. And Consultants Mind with an S in the middle, consultantsmind.com is a blog. And I'd be really curious to hear more about each of your success.
Great. Well, as always, thanks for coming on, my friend. And I look forward to the next time we get to do this. I knew you'd enjoy that show. It's really, really practical tips. John hit some really important points for us that we can take away for all of us that consultants are trained to do really, really well. So let's start at the very beginning. John said the first thing consultants do before they even get started is they scope that project. They don't just say, yes, sure, I'll do that. They say, well, let's get really clear on exactly what you want. And when do you need this by? And exactly how much are you going to pay me to do that? And what's your role in supporting me in all that? So he's really, really good about making sure we understand scoping is the first step of any consultant. So he spent some time on that. He also talked about it's really important that we ask good questions. Consultants are really trained well to ask good questions. They're really, really good at that. And they're really good at making sure that they're clear on what's going on and always looking for other opportunities to add value. He talked about making sure you're getting compensated for your value. The first step in that is understanding what that value is you're bringing. Try and measure it. So then you can say, hey, I'd like a raise, or I'd like a title change, or I want some other form of compensation that's going to really offset all the value that I bring, or make it fair for all the value that I bring. We talked about making sure you're bringing a point of view and how important that is, both an internal point of view and external point of view. We talked about being able to state our assumptions and understanding what the assumptions are. Consultants are really, really good at that, and even pre-wiring meetings. So the last thing I want to kind of settle on as we kind of end our time here today, John reminds us that 90% of consultants leave consulting. And where do they go? The client hires them because they do such a good job doing all these things. The client says, yes, you are clear on expectations. You kept me updated. You know the value you bring. You were constantly keeping me informed. I want you on my team. So when we do these things, not only will it reward us in the short term, we might get promotions and even job security, but it could even result in increases in salary and, as John put, that billable rate. So he said, as long as we're doing two main things, helping leaders make difficult decisions and implementing change, we're going to be operating just like consultants, and it's going to benefit us tremendously. So take a few of those ideas, see if you can put it in place for you tomorrow. And boy, there's no better time than to really be leveraging these than now. The labor market's hot. And so hopefully you can take advantage of it, and it can turn out to help you move up the ladder just a little bit faster.